You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I am Nikki Sims, joined here with the Pacific Northwesterner, Andrew Jackson, who is
Good morning.
Wearing his Patagonia.
I'm gonna put my hoodie on too.
Yeah, there you go. And just swish your arms around so we can really hear the environment. Yeah, there we go. That's what the Pacific Northwest sounds like.
There are so many people out on the trail wearing this exact outfit, a black fleece jacket and jeans. That's like the uniform out here.
So Andrew and I both live in places where we really just pay for the weather. Andrew lives in a really beautiful, lush, green, hilly, mountainous,
lots of water
area. And he was walking in the snow this morning.
Yeah, nice gorgeous. Little dusting.
Yeah.
It was.
And I was...
dusting of snow and waterfalls. It's a nice combo.
Yeah, that is really pretty. But it sounds really nice.
And cold.
And then I was out for a walk last night looking at the sunset with a bunch of palm trees. And yet this morning, we're both at our offices wishing we could turn our heaters on.
Yes. This is for our producer that I'm freezing, wearing like 3 layers in my garage because apparently it makes too much background noise and he has to like manually edit out all those.
Yep. I got in trouble
buzzing
for it too.
Sounds.
And I'm in my 60-degree California weather wearing a skirt and wishing I could have a heater on. Tough times. So, Andrew, we talked about training a bit last time.
Yes, training update.
When we were talking about meet prep. What is happening with your situation now?
All right. So you called me out that I had never done a formal powerlifting competition. Now, I have done, just for clarification, I've done squat, bench, deadlift before, but not in a formal competition setting. But have done sort of like mock meet type of days. Just small point of clarification.
Okay, don't worry. You still have some clout.
So after getting off the podcast last week, I actually called up Jordan Stanton just to kind of pick his brain because I haven't really been, training, I would say. I've borderline been just exercising. I've had somewhat of a program that I've been cobbling together, but not really focused on anything in particular. And we have like 5 weeks basically until the meet. So I was like, what do you think I should do? He got me onto a 3-day split, but because of the amount of time I have left, I'm basically going to be doing every other day training and condensing this 3-day kind of 5-week meet prep plan that he has used with a lot of his lifters. And I'm going to see if I can finish that in time to peak by the week of March 1st. I'm going to go with the approach. This is also an interesting update. I'm going to go with the approach of squat Monday, bench Wednesday, deadlift Friday.
Yeah.
So spread out my attempts over the week.
Why did you choose to go that route?
I chose to do that because, put a little bit of a teaser out here. I'm kicking around the idea of doing sort of a USSF road show and maybe meet up at different gyms across the West Coast to attempt. And I think based on kind of like my energy level, what'll be going on there, it'll work better to kind of just do one lift at a time.
Yeah, because it's going to be a lot to orchestrate.
In particular, because I'm doing that condensed schedule, I want to be able to give my deadlift as much time as possible to taper.
Yeah.
So I think that'll work really well. I'll have about a week and a half from my last heavy deadlift to pulling heavy, like the actual attempt.
Ooh, I hope to see you get over 600.
Yes, that would be the goal.
Yeah.
Sitting at 600 right now, I'd like to get over that. 275, that would be a little mini PR, and 275 kilos would be a nice little kind of like kilo milestone.
Okay.
We'll see.
That's exciting.
So yeah, stay tuned for those that are interested and living on the West Coast for potential meetups, USSF meetups.
I instantly think of us all lifting and then going to get tacos. That's just what comes to mind, which sounds great.
Must get tacos.
We'll have to go to Sancho's here if everyone makes it here to Newport Beach area. So good.
Absolutely. And so when we talked last time, you were not sure what your meet prep plan was going to be specifically. Do you have any, has that come together at all?
Yeah. So I messaged Jordan, and I was also thinking like, man, this was the best idea ever, is to get coached by the guy who's running the meet. Like, is that cheating?
Only if he's judging your meets, which, by the way, I am also a USSF judge for the online competition. So,
oh, well, that seems like a huge conflict of interest.
You mentioned tacos. There may be some,
okay. So if I get enough tacos, okay, got it.
The depth might be evaluated a little bit differently.
Well, I did find the place in the LA area that has the most stupid, delicious carnitas I've like ever had in my whole life. So maybe I'll just get like a pound of carnitas and keep it ready. Yeah. Anywho.
Excellent.
So yeah, I messaged Jordan and I was like, Jordan, what do I have to do to get the most weight on these lifts? And he said, for sure, stretch it out over a week.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. And I wanted to do it on the first week of March because my birthday is the week after. And I just want to like eat and drink and get a massage and just not have to worry.
Nice.
So that's my plan for that. Yeah. And that'll work in nicely if you make it down here for your little road tour.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I mentioned interestingly earlier because in talking with a couple of my clients, and we talked about this on the podcast, like some people might want to, for logistics reasons, do it all on one day, even though that might not be the most optimal. And I had one of those cases where the client was like, look, I know it's going to be probably more optimal, spread it out, but I just want to like get together with my friends, do this one big blowout day. And so it'll be interesting to see like how this plays out.
Yeah.
I do agree that I think it's probably optimal to spread it out for pure performance reasons, but logistically may not be the best for some people.
Yeah. We'll just know that if your client doesn't do well, it'll be entirely your fault as the coach.
Yes, I will take full responsibility. It's Fangman, so
pressure is on.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I also have a story I'd like to add on to our previous
story
podcast.
Time with Andrew. I know you guys are all used to story time with Matt. Let's hear about story time with Andrew.
Right. Yes. So after our conversation about woo-woo things in the Pacific Northwest, I had a different client who said he said he loved the woo-woo, want to hear more.
Was it grinding up crystals and putting it in your chalk? Because that's totally what I'm going to start selling here in SoCal.
No, but this would be another story, but I have done float tanks that it was in this guy's house and he had crystals in the float tank to improve the energy, but that's for another time.
Trippy, man.
This story was my longtime coach that I had out here in the Seattle area, who awesome guy, love him like my brother, and introduced me to many things that have been a positive influence on my life. And the gym at that time for me was like my special place. Like that's where I would go after work and like actually be me, just
like Andrew time.
Andrew to 11.
Oh boy.
Which for those of you who have seen Andrew at 11, it's pretty intense.
Yeah. So, I mean, Barbell Logic Andrew, I don't think like RPE 11 Andrew comes through
not very often,
very much, but I've seen it. I've seen it on the dance floor at one of our coaches' weddings.
Yeah.
And it's intense. It is intense.
Yeah. So like I would come out of corporate mode all day, dad mode at home, and there'd be this
Dockers Andrew,
Costco plaid shirts, need dad, and like all of that would just unleash in this 2-hour period of time at the gym, and it was pretty intense, and it was super fun, and I loved it. We had this like crew of very dedicated lifters, and so it was an awesome environment. But at times, I was admittedly a little over the top.
Okay.
And I go in one day and coach pulls me aside and he's like, Andrew, we need to talk. What did I do? He takes this big breath. Well, it's your energy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What?
This is already such a West Coast conversation. Okay.
Says, you are pointing your energy at people and you're blowing them up with your energy. And I was like, my energy? What are you talking about? Yeah. So you are directing all of your energy. It's like coming out of your face directly into everyone here.
Wow.
And it's too much. I need you to rein that in. And I'm like,
Wow. Okay.
I have no idea. What are you talking about? He's like, all right, here's what I want you to do. When you come into the space, he was very particular about the energy in the space. And it sounds woo-woo.
Like the gym space?
Yes.
Okay.
Like he would do smudging. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's like burning incense,
okay.
To like clear
sage.
the energy. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Like he would do smudging, and like he was very protective of the space, the energy in the space. And it sounds very woo-woo, but I'm sure that maybe people have felt this in different words, that when you go into a space, you can tell things just feel different in different spaces.
Absolutely. I'm totally on board with that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so like he was very careful about managing that and making sure that it was this really positive environment for everybody to come into. Anyways, so he's like, here's what I need you to do. When you come into the space, I need you to imagine that you have this channel of white light shooting straight up out of your head to the ceiling.
Okay.
Like direct your energy up, not
You're
at
like a
people.
searchlight up instead of blinding people with your light. Okay.
Exactly. Right. So I was like, okay. I will direct my energy beam to the ceiling.
Did you pick it up right away?
I tried it, and, I've done visualization before, like, the classic meditation, like imagine the white light tracking through your body and like cleansing your body and all this stuff. So I was like familiar with the white light concept. I gave it a try and people appreciated it. I felt that I was able to not blow people up with my energy.
Not just high beam Andrew all the time.
Right, exactly. So that's my woo-woo story.
Now, is there a way that could carry over into people's gym time? Like if they're feeling a little all over the place? Or
Yes, I think there's definitely some correlation there. I'm sure people have had this experience with training partners who are, or maybe not even training partners, but people at the gym who are just like out of control. They come into the gym, they're hyped up on caffeine, pre-workout, or just like spazzing out,
talking all the time.
La 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 la. They're in your space, like they have no appropriate boundaries or anything like that. Don't be that guy or gal, right? Be aware of what you're bringing to the space. And I think it does help focus your training a little bit. Like part of the problem that I had was like my energy was like everywhere. It was spraying all over the room, and it was like disorganized.
Spraying.
And unfocused. Yes. So focus your energy, channel it. And if the white light shooting up to the ceiling works for you, great. Maybe there's some other way that you can kind of quiet your mind. Bring it to the Iron Man power center in your chest.
I would suggest that sometimes you can feel like your workout isn't like you're doing it because of what you want to upload into TrueCoach, or you're doing it because of a PR, or you're doing it to post on Instagram.
Yes.
And that can be really distracting. So like if someone's feeling like their workout is being governed by external factors, to kind of like those are almost lights also, and like kind of bring that back to your training. What does the barbell feel like?
Yes.
What cues are you working out? You have to like make it way more internal instead of letting it be kind of governed by external factors.
Yeah, I think an easy way to start that maybe doesn't sound so woo-woo is to just pay attention to, or be aware of where your attention is. Like where is your attention during your workout? Just start with that.
That's a great way to
see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what are we actually talking about today?
Well, we are not talking about anything woo-woo. In fact, we were talking about science.
Ooh. Okay.
We want to talk about bench press, specifically this one error that we've been working on fixing or correcting. One error that we see a lot in our lifters, and it's kind of something that's difficult to control, is what is happening with the elbows during the bench press.
Yes.
Sometimes there's too much flare and sometimes there's not enough flare. And there seem to be a slew of cues that one will kind of give their lifter to address elbow flare, like try and bend the bar on the way down, try and bend the bar around your chest, kind of stuff like that. So, but let's break down anatomically what's happening with like the skeleton and muscles when someone is bench pressing. And yeah, let's talk about in detail with bones and muscles what's happening as the bar gets lowered to the chest.
Right. Define our terms first and kind of go into the anatomy, the biomechanics, and then we can talk about how to optimize those things.
So at the top of the bench press, the bar is in the hands, which is balanced over the lower arm bones, the radius and the ulna, which is balanced over the humerus through the elbow, and then it should be balanced right over the glenohumeral joint.
Yep.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
And then what is supposed to happen as it is lowered down into your chest?
So from there, the elbow is going from extension into flexion, as well as the shoulder is, though, going from flexion into extension. Sometimes often confusing that the shoulder flexion is raising your arm, your humerus up over your head, whereas extension is bringing it down, technically behind the back.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is lowering the bar down, and different than any other lift, we actually have a non-vertical bar path. And the challenge, in particular relative to controlling your elbows, is that you have a non-vertical bar path and you have a relatively unstable joint in the shoulder.
And you actually are working through like 3 joints. You have the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder to work through on the bench press.
Right, exactly. You got 3 different joints to control through a 3-dimensional space, and the benefit of the shoulder is that it has this extreme range of motion relative to like your hip, which is the other kind of similar joint in the body, ball and socket joint. But because the scapula floats and you have this ability to move your arm so freely, that comes with a penalty of instability. And so that becomes the challenge as a lifter. As you're controlling the bar down, you're having to manage those 3 different joints with a bunch of relatively small muscles too.
Like a whole bunch of muscles that manipulate the humerus.
Right.
Like 9 muscles insert on the humerus, something like that.
Quite a few. I don't actually have the number off the top of my head. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But it is a lot.
It's like,
and then you have all the supporting muscles involved.
So that's like a lot of different little guys inside your body, like trying to pull the humerus in one direction.
Yes.
And they're just like almost going to like fight each other.
Right.
It's a lot of balance work.
Yeah. So you have all these supporting muscles, and you also have the 3 different prime movers that are trying to work together to move the bar back up. So
which are?
You've got the anterior deltoid, the pecs, which is the prime mover, and then the tricep.
Yep.
So, and obviously all 3 of those are connecting or inserting on the humerus.
And we have another huge muscle that inserts on the humerus.
We do. I'm assuming you're talking about the lat. Yes. The
big old meaty guy.
Big lat, not super involved in the actual pressing motion. The studies that I've read are that the lat is like an order of magnitude less activated than the pec, as an example.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Not to say that the lat is not important. We definitely want that as a stabilizing force. And like you said, helping to control the humerus, but not super involved in actually like driving the bar back up, obviously.
Yeah. It seems like it'd be a huge problem if you're like, when you contract your lats, you're bringing its insertion on the humerus closer to its origin, which runs along the T-spine. And so if you're contracting that seems like it would create a whole bunch of elbow tuck.
Yes. Right.
Which is a problem.
So on the descent, what are you primarily focused on with respect to your elbows and this topic? Like what is the goal during the descent for you?
So theoretically, in my head, when I'm imagining myself bench press, having an out-of-body experience, I am trying to keep the bar balanced over my forearms.
Yes.
If the bar is totally balanced over my forearms, then I know it's going to be right over my elbows, which means that I'm not creating an extra point of rotation at my wrist, and I'm not creating this system where I have to try and rebalance or reestablish that relationship between my elbow being directly under the bar.
Right.
So if I can keep that relationship, then I have 2 joints really well taken care of. And then I have to worry about just getting it over the 3rd joint, which is the shoulder. So I'm taking it out into something that I can actually feel in terms of the bar and the weight creating compression directly over my forearm versus rotation in the elbow. That's what I'm trying to do.
I've actually picked up a couple of different cues from you on the importance of keeping the wrist in the correct position and minimizing that moment arm. the famous one is like the Wolverine claws pointing up out of the back of your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up being optimal there, I found, or it's on average about 15 degrees of angle from the wrist up to the back of your palm or the back of your hand. You're going to have a little bit of an angle there.
Yeah. And if you're listening right now, just make the tightest fist that you can.
Right.
And you'll see Andrew and I look really cool right now. We're making little tiny fists at each other on our Zoom call. But you'll see that there is some angle between the back of your hand and your forearm. If you try and extend your wrist, you can't make a tight fist. And if you try and flex your wrist, you have like this weird looking claw, and you also cannot make a tight fist. So if you just make the tightest fist that you can, like you're really angry at someone, that's how the relationship should look when you're bench pressing also.
And all of that is to get the bar as deep in your palm as you can while still also having your thumb wrapped around the bar.
Yeah.
This is why some people dangerously will put the thumb over the top grip, and what they're trying to do with that is to get the bar even lower on the hand, but we don't want to do that. We're going to keep the thumb wrapped around.
Yes, please.
And yet we want to put our wrist in the optimal position so that the bar can be, to your point, stacked directly over the radius and the ulna. Now, one point of clarification that I want to ask you about is you said you want the forearm stacked directly under the bar. Now, technically, that will put the elbow, like what we think of as the bony sticking out, just the slightest bit in front of the bar.
Yes.
Because the ulna is actually not directly supporting the wrist joint.
That's right.
The radius is. And so we're going to have just the tiniest bit. The elbow itself will be slightly in front of the bar or below the bar, depending on how you want to look at it, to have the actual forearm bones stacked directly underneath the bar.
Yeah, right. Well, which bone has the largest surface area at the hand?
On the wrist is the radius. Like underneath the wrist joint is going to be the radius.
Okay.
The ulna actually floats off a little bit to the side.
Right. And then when you supinate and pronate your hand, it's the radius that moves.
Correct.
Right. The ulna.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm like quizzing you all of a sudden. So the elbow tip, is that part of the ulna?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
So the other advantage of having that slight bit of elbow in front of the bar is the bar path. What we want to do is set up the initial bar path off the chest to go back and up at the same time. So it's kind of like when we set up in the press too. We want a little bit, the elbow, the actual like bony part of the elbow slightly in front of the bar. But now, this is where we start talking about the elbow flare problem, though, is that the degree to which you put the elbow below the bar, I think is going to be a factor in whether or not you get into excessive elbow flare.
Yeah. And why do we not want elbow flare or a lot of elbow flare? When does it become bad?
Okay. So my theory on this is, my general rule of thumb is that quote unquote elbow flare, and I will define that as the elbows moving in a superior to the bar in the frontal plane. Anytime the elbows move superior to the bar, that would be extremely excessive elbow flare.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Meaning like the elbows actually getting above the bar.
That means when Andrew says above the bar, if we're looking at someone bench pressing from the side, we're going to see like the bar on a plane, then we're going to see the elbows on a plane, then we're going to see the shoulders, then we're going to see the squat rack. So if he's saying that the elbows are moving superior to the bar, it means that they're moving towards the shoulders and not towards the hips.
Right. And then obviously if the elbows ever got literally above the bar, now your bar path is going to get
that's just not going to go anywhere.
A lot of trouble. It's not going to be
It's going to be a misrep.
But I also think there's a less extreme version of elbow flare where oftentimes you will see the elbows moving superior or moving to the shoulders. And the bar will also move up with them. So the elbows won't go above the bar, but the bar and the elbows will all kind of slide up to the shoulders without there being any change, any vertical change in the bar path.
And that almost seems like it's more of a rotation in the forearm and not...
Well, it's more of like shoulder...
abduction of the humerus.
Abduction.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Your shoulders are coming up. My theory on that is that it's usually from not effectively applying your pec contraction to the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a sticking point. Maybe, that's where the lift gets tough. It's usually like that 2 inches, 3 inches off the chest.
Mm-hmm.
You first start driving up, you kind of hit that grindy point, and it can be tempting. I also think this is a little bit of a defense mechanism. People will start to shrug
Yeah, I was just going to talk
and
about
bring
that.
their traps in, and it's like a physiological defense mechanism that your body's trying to just get more muscle involved. It's like, I'm
Right.
stuck.
Yeah.
Shrug, because traps will help. No, traps are not going to help you.
Yeah. Well, I think
solve this
I think
problem.
that shortens the pecs without any bar movement. It shortens the pecs
Right.
without the appropriate amount of elbow extension.
Right. So this is why it's a problem.
Yeah.
Is that it's similar to, in my opinion, like the good morning squat, where you shoot your butt back and the knee extends. So you're using your quads. The quads are contracting, but you're not actually moving the bar.
You're just getting more leaned over.
And it's similar, like what you're saying is like you're contracting the pec, but it's not contributing to actually moving the bar.
Yeah.
So you're cheating yourself out of actually moving the bar.
Yeah. That's one of my gauges for if it's too much elbow flare. If I see
Yes.
the humerus move and I see the shoulders move upward towards the rack,
Right.
that's bad because you've now also, you're chasing your target. Because remember, like we said in the beginning, your target is to have the bar locked out over your shoulder joint. So now
Right.
if you've moved your shoulder joint, while you may have moved the bar back, you also moved your target back.
Right.
That's a pickle.
And so here's why I think it's an insidious problem is that at submaximal loads, it can actually, in a sense, help because you can float the bar back up over your shoulder, and now you have minimized the moment arm a bit on your shoulder, right? So you have made it a little bit easier for your anterior deltoids to work, and you get to a point where you can have your triceps take over a little bit more, and so you can finish the rep at submaximal load. But what you'll find, I think, and this has also been my personal experience, is that when you get to a true 1RM or a max effort lift, even maybe it's like the 4th or 5th rep of a set, if you aren't taking advantage of the bottom position and being able to use your pecs, your delts, and your triceps all together synergistically to drive the bar off your chest and create momentum, you won't be able to get the rep done.
Right. You really need all of it aligned well.
Yes. So if you're the type of person that finds yourself flaring up over the shoulders and getting kind of stuck in this position, of like,
and if you find that you
shrugged,
have to, shrugged, and you might know because you find you have to reset your arch for every single rep. And that's because your shoulders are moving away from each other. It's like you're creating flare and then your shoulders are chasing the elbows and then you lose your arch. So if you find you're constantly wanting to reset your arch every time, there's probably something going on with flare.
Interesting. Okay. So we've described the problem, anatomy involved, talked a little bit about the biomechanics. So what do we do about it? Like how do you actually address the elbow flare? Do we just say, tuck your elbows more?
Right. That would be the over
Don't do that.
Tuck, 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 tuck. Flare, 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 flare. Up, 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 up.
So what can we do to optimize rather than just tell ourselves, don't flare?
Right. So I found when Matt was constantly hounding me for flaring too hard on my bench press, the cue that I think worked well for me for the longest amount of time was to imagine that the barbell was a rubber band.
Yes.
And as I brought it down, I was stretching the rubber band across my chest because that's the concept of like my elbows moving out away from each other.
Right.
In a way, like if you actually do this with a rubber band, you don't stretch it away from each other and allow your elbows to come up above your shoulders. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
When you stretch it across your chest, your forearms actually end up stacking really nicely.
Yes.
And your elbows move away from each other. That's the theory that I really wanted to grasp.
Right.
Just kind of in my head mimics what I want to be happening with my pecs. I want to create length in my pecs.
Right. Exactly. I was just going to ask, like, why do you think that works? And I think you just hit the nail on the head, is that I think what we're doing, kind of back to what I was saying earlier, is similar to shoving our knees out in the squat so that we can get our adductors tight. Like the pec is an adductor for the humerus or on the shoulder. And so by stretching out, I think that you are getting your pecs into a more optimal stretch in the bottom of the bench.
Yeah.
And also the triceps too.
Yeah.
The long head of the tricep is actually originates on the scapula. So think about, here's another interesting thing to think about from your setup. What do we do
It crosses two joints
in our setup? What's one of the really important things?
shoulder blades together and down.
Yeah, we retract our shoulder blades,
Yeah.
which is going to help move the origin of the long head of the tricep away from the insertion on the humerus.
Oh, yeah.
So your cue of stretching the bar is going to stretch the pecs, but we're also tightening up the triceps going in, or at least one of the heads of the triceps going into the bottom.
Wow. Is that like if we're making the bench press squats for your arms, which I know Carl Shute calls them that?
Yes, arm squats.
Would that be like the hamstring?
No, the hamstring is going to be actually like the bicep. Think about that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because that crosses the shoulder and crosses the elbow. Yeah.
Yeah, and the bicep doesn't really do much, but so what are the triceps equivalent to?
The quadriceps.
In the squat. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. They're responsible for the elbow extension, just like the quadriceps are, but we only have 3 muscles on the arm, not as strong as the big old quadriceps. But yeah, it's funny to think about the arm squat thing. I end up with this weird image of like either one of those like Boston Scientific crazy robots in my mind, or like toy. You remember the original Toy Story where there was that like Frankenstein robot that had like the kid head?
Oh, yeah.
It was like this weird spider thing. Because like if you start thinking about the arm squat, like actually visualizing your hands sort of like being almost like your feet, and your elbows are like your knees.
Please tell me you're also thinking that your chest is a butt, because that's totally what I was thinking.
Absolutely, the chest butt. And then the head, for whatever reason, like my head starts spinning around on a swivel, and because you know, to make it actually like look like a squat. Anyways, maybe I'm just bizarre there, but
so that's a cue that you can use for lifters who want just another level entirely.
Toy Story, arm squats.
What's a cue or concept that's worked for you?
Okay, so here's where this gets a little bit weird. Is I actually have been thinking about flaring my elbows on the descent.
Okay.
Like, it's the same idea of pulling the bar apart. But I'm actually like, it's almost like shoving your knees out. I'm shoving my elbows out. Like shove your elbows out might be the other cue. Now, just like with shoving your knees out, you can go too far. Like there was a period of time, I remember like 8 or 9 years ago, where I was shoving my knees out so hard that my feet were rocking out.
Oh boy, that's definitely too much.
Right? Same with elbow flare. Like your elbows still need to be vertical under the bar.
Yeah.
But I want to generate as much tension as I can across my chest and on the triceps. So everything coming down to the bottom is stretched tight. Again, just like with the squat, you don't want to go into the bottom and then find tension. And I think that's another thing that happens with excessive elbow flare, is that people come down and they're thinking about, like the other one is the pinch something in your armpit.
I don't
it's
like
kind
that
of a famous cue.
All. Yeah.
I think it actually might be counterproductive sometimes.
Yeah.
Not always. I mean, obviously, if somebody's got, you know, if their elbows are too far out, maybe somebody does need to tighten up a little bit. But if you're pinching something in order to avoid elbow flare, I think that might be counterproductive, because you come down to the bottom loose, and what your body is going to do to solve the problem is find the tension.
Yeah.
So
really good. That's
your
important.
elbow is going to pop up to try to get tension on the pec and the tricep.
Yeah, I think you're hitting something really important there, Andrew, is like, you don't want to have to search for tension at the bottom. You want to create it on the way down, which is also why you want to have a controlled touch. You don't want to slam the bar into your chest, because that's just going to you're going to lose it all.
So this brings up, I think, maybe the next level of things that you can do to address this besides just cues. What are some maybe not corrective exercises, but modified versions or ways that you can program to address this particular fault? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think after you are like totally sure that your grip and touch point are in the right spot, because that could be one of like the setup errors that can make whatever you're trying to do with your elbow flare impossible. Like the Spoto press, been doing a whole bunch of, and all my clients, any of my clients who listen to this are like, oh yeah, I've also been doing a bunch of those now. Because I found that makes you really think about building the tension on the way down.
And then what is the Spoto press for those that may not be aware?
So the Spoto press, it's like a cheater bench press. You lower the bar down, but you stop like an inch or two above your chest, depending on what your coach has you do. It's usually an inch. And then you hold it there for a pause, and then you press it back up and back.
Right. Well, it's funny that you call it a cheater bench, because would you consider it easier to do than a normal bench?
Well, no, because we've been bench pressing forever. But I did notice that when my Spotos got really heavy, I was pausing really high.
Okay, interesting.
Which made me think of maybe people that I might have seen at 24 Hour Fitness being like, "You're not even touching your chest," and I know you're not doing Spoto. But yeah, for sure, it's not easier. It's hard to do
it correctly, to actually lower. You're definitely not doing more weight with that, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's got a bad rap because of exactly what you just described. It's kind of like the bodybuilder bro bench to not go all the way down.
It's the quarter squat.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, the Spoto press is named after one of the best bench pressers in the world.
Oh.
I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Eric Spoto. Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's one of the best bench pressers in the world. And that's what he would do to work on controlling the bar and holding the tension in the bottom. So it's actually from the powerlifting world, because it's kind of associated with the cheater reps. A lot of people kind of shy away from it. But I agree that it's a great way to control, or to work on controlling the bar at the bottom and holding that tension, especially if you pair that with then having a controlled bar path on the way back up. Force, and this was the big one for me, is to force myself to work through that sticky point.
Yeah.
Right off that first 3 to 6 inches off the chest, where I could theoretically move the bar faster if I popped it up to my shoulders and then kind of almost shrugged it up and then popped it out with the tricep extension. But I would force myself to hold that tension in the bottom and then slowly work through that grindy part, because I think it's developing, like I said earlier, pec strength.
Yeah.
Through that range of motion. That was my, I think, big limiting factor for a long time, was that I would cheat the work, the volume work at that lighter weight, and I was underdeveloped in the pecs. Spoto press, or what I was doing, was a lot of pause work as well, really light on the t-shirt, just barely touch the t-shirt and drive back up.
Yep, I agree.
What else? Have you done any other drills or versions of benching? Just Spoto and pause?
Spoto, paused.
Yep. You talked a little bit about Touchpoint. How do you determine the correct Touchpoint? Because there's a lot of variation there, right?
Yeah. What we're trying to do with that game is try and minimize how much horizontal distance we have to, get through as we're pressing the bar from the touch point on our shoulder to back over. Touch point on our chest to back over our shoulder.
Yep.
So if our grip is really narrow, then we end up having to touch really low. And it's just a whole bunch of...
In order to maintain the vertical forearms.
Yeah, in order to maintain the vertical forearms. And
yep.
It seems like when someone's doing close grip bench press, there's a whole bunch of rotation and shoulders moving in and out of position that we don't want. And then you go really wide, then we're in that problem of moving in a straight line up and down right over our shoulder, which can grind stuff there in the AC joints. That's not good.
Yep.
So I want it to be wide enough that I can train all the muscles that I want to train: triceps, deltoids, pecs. And so that it's just the coaching eye.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a complicated question because there's so many different variables, right?
How long is your lower arm? How long is your upper arm?
There's also where the muscle inserts on your arm. That's variable based on person. So where the optimal angle of your humerus is going to vary depending on both the segment length and where the muscle attachment is, where the muscle insertion is. So,
and how big their chest is.
Right. Well, so that's the other major.
If they have a big arch and a huge chest, it's going to be way different.
Yes. So you said something interesting there, that we want to minimize the moment arm on the shoulder, but that's also having to take into account that we use the arch to minimize the range of motion. so that we can lift more weight.
Yeah. Yep.
Particularly if we're competing, right? So like there is actually a version of the bench where you eliminate the arch to increase the range of motion. But in order for, particularly for competition, we're going to use a big arch and we're going to touch a little bit lower so that we can get to that highest point on our chest. So we have to factor in how high is your arch? What are your segment lengths like? What are the insertion points, which you can't know any of that stuff. You're going to have to experiment with where that right touch point is. It's probably going to be somewhere between 40 and 60 degrees of angle in your shoulder and probably right around the nipple line, maybe a little bit below on your, touching on your sternum. But you're going to, I think each person's going to have to experiment like where they can get the most optimal recruitment of all three of those big prime movers, the delts, triceps, and pec.
Ooh, yeah. Complicated, man.
A lot of pieces there.
A lot going on.
So I actually want to, if we can, finish at maybe what you could call the beginning, which is the setup. We didn't really talk too much about the setup. And I think that is often massively overlooked or undervalued with particularly new lifters. So do you have a specific sequence that you go through? Like, how do you make sure that all the pieces are in the right place?
Yeah. Go through this kind of quickly for anybody who's bored of talking about the bench press already. But
Oh yeah, we are running a little long, huh?
I did a post on my Instagram where I actually laid it out. But if I can remember right now in my head, I'll sit on the bench. My feet will be about where I want them to be in terms of width, which is kind of like my squat stance. And then I'll lay back and place my hands. And I'll like place my hands like that's where I want them to be. Not just like, okay, hands on the bar, like that's going to be my grip. And then I'll get my shoulders where I want them to be and start rolling them underneath my chest. And then I'll slide my butt up towards my shoulders. And that's when I kind of really lock in my leg drive, because at that point, I want to start feeling my leg drive through my hands.
Ooh.
So it's kind of like in a deadlift where you're squeezing the slack out of the bar. And, when you hit that just right, the bar just kind of floats for that first inch.
Yep.
I like to feel my leg drive into my upper back that's getting smushed into the cushion of the bench. And then I start to feel the weight in my hands. And if I hit that just right, then the bar will kind of just float off, especially if you're on a monolift, just kind of floats off the monos. And then if you're in the right position on a regular bench, it'll kind of float off the pins too. But it shouldn't be like hands on the bar. Like there shouldn't be this dead zone from your shoulder to the bar. Like that needs to be active and you start feeling your full body through that.
Yep.
So that when you unrack it, you don't have to like wiggle yourself back into position. Like everything should be totally set.
Yes. I would say that and breath are the things that I see most people struggling with at first, is that they treat the setup as if it's the thing you do once the bar's out of the J-cups.
Yes.
Yes.
And bad.
So they'll unrack it and then they'll try to wiggle into position and then they'll get their breath and then okay, now I can bench.
Drives me crazy.
The bench, I really like the way you described it there. Like you want to take advantage of the bar being in the rack, wedge yourself into position, and the bar should, if you do it right, just float out of the rack.
Your setup should lift up the bar, just like in a deadlift. Your setup should start to float the bar.
Ooh, that's good. Yes. And then that sets the stage for what we were talking about to connect this back to elbow flare. In my opinion, if you do that setup correctly, you've now set the stage to be able to feel tension from the moment you have it in lockout. And you want to maintain that, hold that as much as you can, fill the space, flare the elbows out, stay tight in the bottom, control it all the way down.
Yeah.
And then same thing on the way back up, explode on the way back up with everything you've got, all moving the bar back up and vertically, controlling the elbows directly under the bar, and then you're good to go.
Think of your pecs like a giant rubber bands that you're stretching across your chest, because they are.
Good.
Yeah. Ooh, fun. I can't wait to bench again.
Have we solved elbow flare for the universe?
Yes.
Or maybe not. Maybe we want elbow flare in the universe.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, we talked about, like I said, my cue is to flare my elbows on the way down.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Okay, elbow flare, you can stay around.
All right. Cool.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to see you all try this out in your own practice. See if you can find something that resonates with creating tension, creating that balance over your forearms. And then since we're both on the West Coast, creating balance in your life.
Focus your energy.
All right. That was another episode of the Barbell Logic podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Andrew.
My pleasure.
You'll hear us next time. Wow, I need to really work on that. Thanks for stopping by.
Bye.